Hello, everybody. We're so excited to have you here at the P&G Alumni Forum. This is a new initiative to supplement the chapters, the webinars, all the programs we have, and designed specifically to address the needs of our function. I'm going to share my screen here. So today we're going to talk just a little bit about the forum leadership and what we're going to do and how you can volunteer to help if you'd like. And then we'll get to the main event and the expert panel, talk about what's next. And then we are going to have a live networking opportunity after the session. So what I would say is if you do have the opportunity to stay longer, please do so and see some of the other people who have joined. So this is the leadership team. I'm Jeff Goldstein. You could say I started P&G in the mid-60s because I was born into a P&G family. Bob Goldstein was my dad, for the few of you who may know him. And then I joined Procter after college in brand management, did a dozen years consulting, and then since 2012 have run Accupol Precision Research, focusing on strategy, innovation, and marketing with really one-of-a-kind tools. We also have Ann Wymore. Ann, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ann Wymore. I worked at P&G for 16 years. Super grateful for the experience, currently at Clorox.
Wonderful. We do have Laura asked to talk, and I'm not sure why. Laura, if you could put your message in the chat, that would be great. For those people who are new to this, of course, this is kind of what we've defined as our initial scope. It's available on the forum page of the LUMS website, and we're really designing this for people who previously or currently work in insights and analytics or are interested in it. And we realize that this is an era of unprecedented change and transformation. We're focused on driving connections between alumni, building capabilities and opportunities for enrichment and learning best practices as our industry is really transforming. Building understanding about how to work in different careers and organizational approaches, and then trying to get back to the community. You can sign up to make sure you know about future events at the alumni website. Go and find your profile in the top right, click on my newsletters, and then just start typing insights and analytics, and then you'll be able to select that forum announcements at the bottom there.
And just to share a little background about how this got started, a bunch of us got together in person at DC at one of the recent alumni in-person get-togethers, and we had so much fun. I think a lot of it was about community building, reconnecting with old friends, helping support each other through career transitions, and also helping each other learn and develop new skills. And we thought, wouldn't it be amazing if we could create a virtual forum that would allow all of us to connect with each other, even if we're not in a particular location. And so I really wanted to thank Jeff, who's done the lion's share of the work to get this pulled together, as well as the rest of the leadership team, who you saw earlier. We are kicking this off, so we're learning a lot still, and we would encourage folks to take our survey that you'll see in the near future to share your input on the kind of content you'd like to see going forward. And also help us spread the word. I mean, like Jeff said, this is a community for other people who are not only insights, but also interested in insights. So excited to have you all here, and thank you.
Absolutely. So we have the full bios for our distinguished panel at the event page on pgalums.com. Many of you may already know these great leaders from P&G. We've actually got 75 attendees on the site so far, and there's another 125 who signed up and may watch later. As we're going through the session, go ahead and open the chat and feel free to text where you are, put in the chat where you're coming from, as well as feel free to talk through the panel. But you should know that the panelist and the moderator and then Sarah Faulkner are going to be watching. Sarah's going to be watching the Q&A, so that at the end of the program, she can sort of mine those questions and and present them to the panel. So if you have a question that's got to go in the Q&A tab, just click at the bottom of the screen. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jessica, the moderator, and Jessica is going to introduce the panel. And we'll go off screen and others will go on screen.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here with you today. And if my panelists will come back on screen, we will go ahead and get started. So it is really a joy to be with these three ladies today. You've heard a very quick introduction, and I am going to have them introduce themselves, but I just absolutely love how some connections just never fade. And as we think about our theme for today, transitions in an era of transformations, I believe that these are three of the best to ever do it. So with that, I'm going to ask each one of you to quickly introduce yourselves. If you could just tell us the time you spent at P&G, your last role at P&G, because with such storied careers, we would have to allow 20 minutes, I think, for some of you. So just tell us your last role at P&G and your current role or position. Kim, let's start with you.
I probably know most of the people out there, but just as a quick tutorial, I was with P&G just shy of 30 years. My last role was VP of Global CMK. And as most of you know, that role has really expanded and taken on new horizons. So good for Kirti for getting us there. And my current role is that I'm a partner with Missouri, a small research company. And I've stepped away from projects, so I am looking for my next gig, so to speak. I am a partner with Social Venture Partners, the chapter based here in Cincinnati, which is a nonprofit, and I need to fill my plate with some more things. So on we go.
Thank you so much, Kim. Autumn, and then Dawn. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Autumn McDonald. It's a joy to be here with you today. I spent a total of 9.5 years at Procter, including my internship time. And my last role was as a Band 3, a senior manager in the North America MDO. That's what it was called at the time. And I was leading insights for the drug and dollar channel. My current role is that I am the owner of a market research consulting firm called ADM Insights and Strategy. And I also hold a faculty position at Howard University, which is the #1 ranked historically Black college and university in the country.
Thank you, Autumn. Dawn.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Good to see you guys out there. I see a lot of familiar names. Very exciting. I was actually with P&G for 19 years. And when I left, I was leading the shopper capabilities. And now I am with Schwab. I've been with Schwab 3 years now. I'm in charge of their investor services analytics, as well as their wealth advice solutions. I will say one small thing. Sorry, Jessica, I'm going to go a little bit off script. I spent 4 years at Disney as well. And a lot of people find that very exciting. So I wanted to make sure there was a little Disney interlude from P&G before joining Charles Schwab.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So again, we're going to start a little bit with the transitions part, again, keeping true to our theme for today. And I came across a really interesting statistic that I'll share to get us started here. It was from a recent Fast Company poll, and I think it was done near the end of 2023. And what it said, this poll found that approximately 52% of American employees are considering a career change. And in fact, 44% are already planning to do it. And so this is a very timely discussion because I would venture to believe that there are some who are on the call today who are in fact considering it. So thinking about your career transitions, was there a pivotal point or key decision that really prompted you to make the change? And I'd like to hear from all of you, and we'll start with Dawn.
Okay, awesome. So quite a few of you guys know I grew up in Alabama, so I've always been a huge Alabama fan, and part of that was being in the Southeast. So my move to Disney was because I did want to move back to the South to be closer to my family. As unfortunately I've lost family members, as unfortunately probably everyone has. I've looked again. Do I want to move again? But now, and a couple of you guys heard this last week, I have a granddaughter here. So mine is entirely location based. I will always want to be in the Southeast, just be near family. So I guess just stick with the number one of work-life balance, and family is number one for me.
Awesome. A granddaughter. I'm so jealous. All right. Autumn, tell us about any impact, that or directed you to your career changes.
Yeah, so I think there were a couple of things. For me, the the key factor that resulted in me leaving Proctor was location. Cincinnati was great in a lot of ways, but for me personally, I needed to be in a different city that offered a different variety of things, both in terms of lifestyle and demographic. And so my choice to leave Proctor was in order to get to New York, which provided me with those things. And then I had a stint in marketing, which was interesting. And quite frankly, coming back to insights was fueled by an illness. I got quite sick, and it made me realize that life is short. And because life is short, I needed to do what I truly love. And at the end of the day, research is what I love. And so I left marketing and came back to insights. And then I would say the other pivotal moment was returning to school to get another degree. And grad school really resulted in a big change for me that I'm thoroughly enjoying.
Thank you. Kim, tell us your thoughts.
Well, I started with P&G when I was only 19. So my full-time employment started while I was in college as a co-op student. And that allowed me to get my 30 years younger than most people. I had been in that top job for a little over 7 years. And part of my motivation to leave was really that I needed a change. And all of you know that jobs at P&G in general, and certainly as you move up, become very, very challenging. And after 30 years of it, I just felt like I needed to go and try something different. I had been very involved in the industry, as most of you know, while I was at Procter & Gamble. And interestingly enough, as I announced my retirement plans, I had more than one individual say to me, if you want to continue to impact the industry, you need to get experience on the supply side. And I had never thought about that, just hadn't explored it, hadn't puzzled it out. And things come together, I guess, as they should. And I was offered a chairman role at Kantar, obviously one of the biggest supply companies in the world. And that became my stepping stone to supply side. It was a great learning experience.
Yeah, so I think something I would have done differently is I would have gone into each role after Procter with greater intentionality. I was blessed to work at numerous companies that were wonderful in a variety of ways. And I went into each role knowing that I wanted to learn new things. But I would have gone in with much more precision in that intentionality and being clear and saying, this is what I specifically want to learn in this capacity and in this role. And here is the amount of time I see myself being here. I would have been much more focused and deliberate about that. And hindsight is 2020, but that's something now that I share with the folks that I mentor, is for them to go into each position with a clear vision of what they hope to gain and for what period they see the season lasting in their lives.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So really building on that and just kind of following that thread, has anything surprised you about yourself over the course of time and during these transitions? Has anything surprised you? Dawn, what about you?
Sure, I would say I didn't appreciate, kind of where you were, Kim, I didn't appreciate the training and the leadership skills that were ingrained in us, and that you don't have mentors everywhere. You don't have the training opportunities everywhere. That P&G really, I say I grew up at P&G. I truly believe that. I mean, the 19 years there equipped me to jump from industry to industry. Obviously, if I've moved to travel and hospitality and moved to financial services. And I'm amazed that I work with senior directors and directors that just don't have the leadership skills that you saw everywhere at P&G. At P&G, I mean, if there was a bad leader, everybody knew it because they were so far in between, or view in between. So I think I've been surprised, and I didn't appreciate how wonderful P&G was in terms of being a great training ground.
So Kim, tell us, what about you? Anything surprise you? You mentioned a couple of things earlier, but is there anything else that you can share?
Could go a lot of directions with this one. I'll tell you one that probably surprises a lot of us. And that's that, I've now been exposed to literally hundreds and thousands of different companies across all sectors, all sizes. And the thing that shocks me is the quality of the talent at P&G that I may have taken for granted, because everyone literally was equal in terms of brain power. If we had someone who didn't make it, it was often more of a fit issue than it was brain power. Oh, I would say always. And as you go up against other companies, you soon find that not all companies have the same kinds of requirements, expectations, training programs. And so you're not always working with the best of the best. And that brings out some interesting dynamics, particularly when you have your P&G training. You're very process oriented, you're very intentional about everything that you do. You run into people who just have all different kinds of skill sets, brain power, training, et cetera. And the thing that surprised me was how much I had to adapt to a very, very different way of working. Now that's more specific to Kantar and my experience there than anything else. I will say, when I moved to Missouri, and the majority of our talent in terms of those who were leading our projects and our project managers, not so many of them came from Procter, not all of them, but we were hiring the best of the best. And I could breathe a sigh of relief when I got back to working with people who shared the same values, shared the same ways of working. And that's just a big adjustment. It wasn't that I was naive to that, but I didn't realize how big of a deal that was.
I completely agree. When I left P&G, as a lot of people know, I also went into the consulting field with Impactful, and I got a lot of questions from folks about the transition. But like you said, Kim, when you start to work with other companies, we sometimes take for granted, or at least not acknowledge the extent of which the skill set is there at P&G. And when you start to work with other companies, it becomes really, really evident. A lot of people will call and ask for advice in making the transition. So I'd love to hear from each one of you. What advice would you give them? I mean, you've again touched on some really critical and important points, but what advice would you give to those who are considering, or perhaps who are newer in their transition to a different career or a different company? Autumn, let's start with you on this one.
So the advice I would give to someone who's considering a career transition is threefold. And the first thing is to invest in ongoing education, to consistently take the time to upskill and make sure that you are not only maintaining functional mastery in your current domain, but also diversifying your skill set at the same time to be competitive in the marketplace. The second piece of advice I would give is to maintain a network of trusted advisors. And that network of trusted advisors, I believe, will morph over time. In some cases, it's retaining people who have been trusted points of guidance for you for many years. In other cases, it means bringing new people into the fold that represent the direction in which you're heading. So I think that trusted board of guidance is key. And the third thing I would say is be open to new possibilities, because sometimes the transition doesn't take shape in the way you may have initially envisioned. And it's that openness to new possibilities that can result in you having a fabulous transition that far exceeds your expectations.
Dawn, what's your advice?
Mine are pretty similar to Autumn. I would say One, always landscape. Even when you're comfortable and you're happy with where you are, always be on the lookout for what are other opportunities. I will tell you, I wasn't looking when Charles Schwab came along, and I thought, no way am I going to financial services. But back to Kim's point about culture, I love the culture. I fell in love with the people that I was interviewing with and said, I can fit right in with this culture, this company, and I've loved it. So I think always understanding the opportunities out there. I think also, like Autumn mentioned, being curious. Always keep up your skill set, whether that's going back to school, going to trainings, going to conferences, and then especially with the landscaping, the networking. You have such a large P&G network now. Somebody knows somebody that worked at that company or knows of somebody or worked on a project for that company, and they can tell you what's really going on more than what a glass door would show you. So I think just staying on top of your game and staying in touch, and your skills are transferable. What you've learned, hard and soft skills, they're transferable to any industry. You're going to be successful leaving P&G.
Yeah.
Not a lot to add. I think Dawn and Autumn both gave great answers. One thing I would highlight, though, is that we talk in broad terms about culture. We've all have alluded to it in one way or another. But when I dig into culture and where I've been surprised, it's often misalignment of values and principles, and that can be at an individual personal level, it can be at a corporate level, but sometimes the landscape work that you need to do in moving to another company or even contemplating a move is really getting someone on the inside to share with you their experience and get a sense of what those principles and values are. I think at Procter, it was always very clear from our mission and vision. And even though we might have argued a bit about some of the finer points, we were really clear on what the mission was. And AG probably brought it to life the most during the time I was there by going with consumer as boss and having everything be considered from a consumer perspective. And that doesn't mean the consumer was always the lead voice. We certainly had to consider financials and strategies and all kinds of things. But if you're not in a company where the values and the principles are clear from the top, it is tough. It is really a tough road to go. And I would not go to a company where I don't see alignment with either within the company or with my own personal values. That would be a non-starter.
Ladies, that's some really, really sound advice. And, as you talked about, Kim, the consumer is boss as really our guiding light at P&G, which really helped us to stay focused on what was most important, particularly in our space of insights and analytics. We very often were the ones to continue to carry that torch. So thinking about the landscape today, shifting gears a little bit and really focusing on the industry and the kinds of transformations that are happening in the industry. I know some of the themes or some of the trends or some of what we're seeing now, of course, we're seeing this increased adoption in DIY research. We're seeing, of course, AI, and Gen AI, because many of us in the field would say, we've been doing AI for years, but it's this generative AI. We're seeing those kinds of trends. We're also seeing a greater reliance on digital platforms. So thinking about the shift in the industry, what are one or two significant transformations that you have personally experienced or personally observed in your space over this course of time? And so I'm going to just call on probably just a couple of you for this to keep us moving, because I have some wonderful questions I want to make sure I get to so that people have the benefit of hearing a lot more of your experience. So with that, let me start with you, Dawn, on that one as well. So one or two significant things you've observed.
I think the human insights. I think the storytelling. because I think when we got trained, it was just bringing forward, what do you see in the data, what are the pattern recognition and such. And I think when we started bringing the human element, being attached to the business, having the business perspective, that's what is going to keep us relevant throughout. So as we move more to Gen AI, and as you mentioned, Jessica, yes, we've been doing AI for years, but as we move more to Gen AI, it is going to be about the human insights and bringing that human touch to the research that will keep us around. I truly believe that.
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Autumn, what are some of the significant transformations that you've experienced or observed?
So there are two transformations that come to mind for me, and I would start by saying not all transformations are positive. And so the two transformations I would call out are not necessarily positive. One is what I would refer to as the de-skilling of market researchers. And I have seen over the years a decline in what I would refer to as the functional mastery in many market researchers, such that as we work with clients, and my company, we work on 5 continents and with a broad range of clients across industries. And it's been interesting to see the number of insights folks and market researchers who don't have certain skills that many of us who are on this Zoom would have taken for granted because of the wonderful training that we received at Procter. So one transformation would be the de-skilling of market researchers. The other transformation is what I would refer to as a shift at the expense of thick data. And as a social scientist, as an anthropologist, thick data alludes to what Dawn was mentioning, that human-centered data that provides depth and allows us to engage in meaning making, that data that is culturally grounded. And so I think that there is an important role for big data and thick data to play. And unfortunately, what we've seen is a shift to big data at the expense of thick data in some cases.
Autumn, thank you for pointing that out, because you're right. Not all transformations are good ones. So really appreciate, offering that counter perspective on that. You both mentioned human insights, thick data, storytelling, those kinds of practices and skill sets that we've had. Kim, I'd love to hear from you kind of in that space as well, is how do you see this focus or practice on human insights evolving? What have you seen in that space based on your experience?
Well, I think I would first point out, and I agree with the answers that both Dawn and Autumn gave, but I would point out that what you've got to have is a learning culture. And if I had any critique of Procter and many other companies, it's that we don't necessarily go after learning, whether that be human or all the other things that we need to integrate with human insight. We often go with a checkbox mentality against metrics, which help us decide whether or not initiatives should go into market, et cetera. So one of the pieces I would highlight is that we all need to embrace learning. And that leads to the second point, which is learning isn't just for the sake of learning. Learning is for the sake of getting to deeper insights. And I agree that many of those need to be human insights. But researchers, if I have an observation and in my own experience, often have a bias against new technologies that come to get to new learning. And there are good reasons for that would take us the rest of the session to talk about. So I'm not going to defend why researchers are the way we are. It just is a human nature, I'll say, of those who are trained in the nuts and bolts of research. But what happens is that we have a bias then against embracing new technologies. And I'll go back in my own history. And I know this individual is on the website. So I was in beauty care, not quite the top leadership, but near the top leadership. And we had an individual in marketing. Her name was Kristen Sharp. And at the direction of her boss, Mark Shar, she was starting to experiment on the internet, brand new at the time, the internet, to do concept research. And the bosses in CMK could not have been more upset about it, primarily because they were afraid that we shouldn't be embracing that technology. It would lead to bad decision making. It couldn't be representative, and you go down that whole list of things. And in the end, I wish that I would have been brave enough to go to CMK management and say, look, embracing new technology isn't a problem. We just have to help the company put it in proper perspective. And oh, by the way, we in CMK should be embracing that technology ourselves and learning what the implications are and how we use it. And in the end, Krista and I developed a great relationship, and it did come into beauty care first. And we all know what happened with the internet and doing online research. And now we've got another transformation related to online research and poor sample quality. So each thing has its life. But now as we look at AI, in some ways, we've been doing AI for a long time, but we haven't really let the vision for what AI can be for research, and particularly in getting into human insights, come to bear. We haven't embraced it. And I go back to that internet example and say, it's kind of the same thing, but on a lot bigger scale, because AI, at least if you believe the recent Nobel Prize winner in economics, AI is one of the top 3 transformations that will affect the economy, not just how we do research, but will affect the economy globally. And that leads me to believe that we're not doing nearly enough in terms of bringing transformation into research and learning and analytics so that we can be leading. And I would hope for Procter, and I know Curity is very engaged in this, so this isn't a new thought from the standpoint of Procter, but from the standpoint of all of us researchers, grab it. And it's not something to be afraid of. It doesn't mean you have to completely learn new skills. It's more about, how do I integrate? How do I evolve my own thinking? And how does that match up against the needs of various clients that are out there or various organizations that are out there? So that topic could be future fodder for a long call, Jessica.
Well, and thank you for saying that, because that gives us an idea for another forum, because you're absolutely right. There's so much more that we could say in that space and explore, frankly, with all of these great minds. So Jeff will note that potentially as a future topic. Following though on what you said, Kim, Autumn, I'd like to ask you, we hear a lot, obviously, and it's such, as Kim just said, such a big space regarding AI and analytics. Just, as you start to think about the analytics of it all, do you think there is a shift in balance between, again, I'll use the phrase human insights and analytics? Do you think there's a shift? Do you think that we've evolved to the point where we're losing sight of the human insights? As Kim said, I mean, it all comes together. But again, my follow-up question to you is, right now, given the focus, what are your thoughts?
So I don't know that I can say definitively that there's a shift, because I think it varies greatly by company. And I say that as I think about the various clients we work with. We have some clients who very much have shifted to a focus of analytics. We have other clients who have doubled down on what I would refer to as human-centric insights, separate from what we might typically call analytics. I would also say that, human insights do involve analytics. I don't see them as being completely separate from each other. I think that in some ways, analytics are a precursor to human insights, and in other cases, vice versa. So I don't see them as being at odds one another. I think the key is for us to think about how we use them in a synergistic and symbiotic way. I would also say that I think the key is for us to be more integrated in that thinking, and that is a challenge for us. And I think, as Kim mentioned, proper perspective, I love that phrase. It's important for us to have that, and considering both the relationship between insights and analytics, but also the role of Gen AI therein, because I think Gen AI has a role to play in insights. It's important for us as insights thought leaders to be forward leaning while simultaneously applying a sufficiently critical gaze and determining what are the appropriate use cases and what are not. And I would just say those appropriate use cases or the proper perspective varies greatly by population.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think you both hit a key point of the integration. And I do think very often it is sometimes seen as an either or.
Mhm.
We talked a little bit so far about skill sets. We've talked about culture in a way. So I want to probe a little bit more in that space before we begin to wrap up. And we do have a poll that we want the audience to get ready for that we'll launch here in just in a few minutes. But thinking about skill sets and culture, we had an opportunity. When I say we, I'm speaking about the P&G alumni, the Insights and Analytics Leadership Forum. We had an opportunity to speak with Kirti here recently, and he talked about skill sets. And one of the skill sets he talked about is curiosity. I'd love to hear your thoughts on other skill sets and frame it in the standpoint of, we're all cheerleaders for P&G, and we know that P&G is a wonderful training ground, and it has taught us our years, whether it's 9 or 30, plus, P&G has taught us many, many things. That said, it's not perfect. It's not perfect. Many of the skills are transferable, but perhaps there are some new skills that people or you specifically had to learn that you hadn't considered before. So in this grand scope of skills, what are some of the skills of you talking to this audience today? And there's two parts. Generally, what are some of the skill sets that people need to focus on? And two, from your own experience, what weren't you prepared for when you made the transition? All right, so Dawn, let's start with you on that.
Sure. I will. I laughed. I actually wrote it down and chuckled. I love the way Kim put brain power, because it is very true as you work with other companies and you move to other companies, and it is something we take for granted. But so saying that, I would say one of the skills that you have to practice is humility. When you go into a new company, use your curiosity and be curious, but you have to be very careful. Well, I would have thought about it that way. Or when I was at P&G, I did this. You have to limit those examples. And that's one that you learn and you see, but it's not one you're used to, because it's very easy when you move from oral care to personal health care. Well, in oral care, we did it like this, and people appreciated that. When you move to a Disney, well, at P&G, we would do this. It doesn't hit over so well after a couple of times. So I definitely think humility. And then you mentioned it, Jessica, as well as Autumn. It is keeping the curiosity. The curiosity, be the early adopter, try the new things. I think back to, as I think about a transformation, think about qualitative. We've always run qualitative. We always said, you can't do video. You can't do that. You can't video your respondents. You can't talk to them that way. What do we all do at COVID? We had to do that. I had some of the best qualitative groups I've ever had in my career during the COVID days when we were talking to respondents at home. And I remember so many times across both, honestly, at P&G and at Disney, it was, no, you cannot do qualitatives online. You have to be there in person with them. And there are benefits there, but when we have to adjust, or we're forced to adjust, hopefully we'll never have a COVID again, but when there is another transformation like that, you're going to figure it out. And the nice thing is, because you're an early adopter or you've tried these things before, you'll know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So my two answers is practice humility and then keep that curiosity up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dawn. Kim, your thoughts?
I think the answer really depends on what it is you're considering going into. If I look at my own experience in moving from large client to supply side, there were some things I took for granted in my Proctor portfolio of learning that I thought would be in place in other places. So I was doing a lot of teaching And teaching people in a very different kind of company environment, et cetera, required me to really think about how to go back to the basics. You can't assume that the level of knowledge is what you might have had with a Proctor audience. So there's that side of it. But the other side is, I think as we think about other companies, there is a place for what I call the very early learning. You could apply curiosity to this factor as well. But if I think in Proctor about some of the things that we weeded out, some of the HPT techniques, for example, which were all about early learning for our products research group. And we weeded it out because we thought we needed more efficient use of dollars in terms of evaluating products for market, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, all of that learning was needed by products research. And I could think about other functions that also needed early learning. So I think as far as early skills, it's about thinking how you broaden your skill set to be relevant for the various types of companies that you're going to be working with. Again, that applies to both client and supply side. And some of the early learning things you have the most freedom with to experiment, learn, and do cycles of learning. And I think we in P&G just weren't as adept at that. It wasn't a big part of our skill set. Some of us did assignments in products research as I did, and you learned the value of it. But as a broad skill set, we didn't have it. So that might be something to think about in terms of curiosity about different ways of learning that would be relevant for the companies that you're working with.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Great advice. You know, again, cultures, right? So we talked a little bit of skills we mentioned on the culture. So to double click on that, Autumn, you, I think, have probably had the most varied experiences since leaving P&G. When I think about the different companies, when I think about academia, when I think about owning your own company. So what was easy and what was hard about moving to those various cultures? Tell us a little more about your experiences.
So, when I left Procter, I thought I was prepared for anything, right? Because P&G is such an amazing company. And there were some things I wasn't prepared for in the new cultures. So one of the things that was really eye-opening to me was that there are cultures in which I worked in which strategy was a bad word. The focus was on being tactical. And, at Procter, we valued strategy. And I had to go into those environments and really learn to emphasize shorter term tactics rather than longer term growth or strategy. And so that was a learning experience for me in those cultures. Another component was processes. And that was a big cultural shift to go into companies and organizations that were not process oriented at all. That was a significant shift leaving Procter. And then, Kim alluded to this in terms of values. I was not prepared to go into other cultures in which integrity was not valued. And that was a bit of a shock for me that I was not prepared for. So you asked about cultures. That was a big cultural shift, Jessica. And then I'll also say, there's been mention of humility on this call. And working in different companies, I would absolutely say yes. Humility consistently was something that was valued in those cultures. That said, when you think about academia, it's quite different. And in fact, I received a very clear message from someone in my leadership chain, my management chain, over the last 12 months, that I needed to check the humility at the door, that this was academia, and that they didn't hire me to be humble. They hired me because I was smart, and that I needed to make sure everyone knew that very clearly, and to show how smart I was, that humility was not going to contribute to my success in the academic institution. So that was a big shift for me, because the idea of you must be humble, you must be show humility had been driven into me company after company. And now straddling two worlds, I have to know that there are moments when I'm working in business where I need to demonstrate that humility. But when I step on campus, that I need to let go of that cultural norm because it's not a relevant cultural norm for that environment.
Awesome. You know, one of the skill sets that I think we all learn from P&G is agility, right? And so what you're talking about, I think, is really a great example of the agility. Dawn, I'd love to hear from you on this because you know, we're in CPG world and then in I don't know how to classify Disney, I should, but entertainment space and fun and now, you know, the finance world. So talk a little bit about what you saw as some of the more difficult or easier parts of the different cultures.
I think I'm glad you brought up agility, Jessica. I'd forgotten to mention that earlier. I think the agility is something that we took for granted. I mean, we moved every 18 to 36 months. You pretty much had a new assignment growing up in P&G, which was a huge enabler because now companies reorg. It's corporate America. Everybody reorgs. They reorg very often. So with saying that, people have a hard time getting used to that, and they didn't grow up at P&G under that, so they don't understand, okay, there's another reorg, oh my goodness, the sky is falling. No, it's not. So it's about being agile, about just going with it. But back to the culture that you mentioned, I think with culture, like Kim and Autumn both mentioned as well, you've got to believe in the values. You've got to agree with the way the company is going. As a senior leader in the companies, you have to stand behind those. And when you don't agree with them, it's time to move somewhere else. So I think that, you know, no one ever has had a problem with P&G's culture. Culture is what sets it apart from other companies. And I think it's one that you don't realize that as well until you move to other companies and understand that.
So we've talked about transitions. We've talked about a little bit about the transformation. Again, we all agree that would require us about another hour or so to go in depth. And then we've touched upon skills and culture as well. So I want to launch a poll here because there is a lot of discussion. We've seen it with some of the questions that have been asked. Certainly in the consulting space, we get asked the question about these trends and transformation. So hopefully everyone can see the question as it appears on your screen. So we'll just give you a little bit of time to answer. I think you can read it for yourself. So I'll let you take a second or so.
Jessica, we have 90 people participating, which is fantastic. So it may take a moment for all of them to get in. We've got 44 responses and counting.
Awesome. You just show the results when you think we've gotten the majority.
Yeah, I'll just wait for them to slow down. It's like watching the ticker tape at schwab.com to see my stock price go up. 71. Okay, it's starting to slow. So we're going to call it.
Okay. So given the current state of transformation in the industry, where would you like to see more focus in the next 2 years? And this was by design a single choice. You probably had more than one answer, but we just really wanted to get a sense. And so we've got about 21% saying, I'd like to see more in human insights. Interestingly, very few people said big data and analytics. Interesting. Machine learning, 34%, tied with storytelling and bringing data and insights to life. But, you know, I don't know what 1%, let's see, that 1 out of 71 actually said passive data and social listening. So, and the one person just wasn't sure, probably because I forced them to choose. Thank you with that. So to the panel, we got a tie there in the space of, you know, AI, machine learning, and storytelling. I'd love to just hear your reactions to that and whether you agree or disagree. Perhaps you might have answered in another space. So just really quickly, I'm just going to ask you before we get ready to move to Q&A, what are your reactions to the poll? I think it was a little interesting in a couple of spaces. So Autumn, let's start with you.
So I'm not surprised by the interest in AI, especially. That's a hot topic. It's something that we're all hungry to learn more about. The potential is huge. I actually recently wrote something on LinkedIn expressing my point of view on this topic, and that is I think that as we embrace AI as a discipline in market research, we have an opportunity to also be more robust in applying a critical gaze. And I can't say that enough, because the how effective AI is varies greatly by population. And I'll keep reiterating that. There are tools that do a fabulous job with certain groups, and they fall short with other groups. So for example, there are lots of tools that are great in leveraging AI for research transcription. They fall short with African American vernacular English, and they also struggle with West African languages. There are tools that are wonderful in using AI moderated techniques for interviewing. The problem is, when you look at those tools, the voice and vernacular of that AI interviewer causes bias for marginalized constituents. And people aren't thinking through these things, oftentimes because they themselves are not part of marginalized communities. And so that then results in exacerbated marginalization and further exclusion of certain groups. So I'm not surprised by the result. What I do hope is that we as market researchers will embrace the technology while simultaneously doing a better job of applying a critical gaze.
And thank you for highlighting that, because we know the struggle continues with really and truly balanced and representative data right across the board. So thank you for highlighting that. I want to wrap up here to get Kim's perspective. I would love for you to wrap us up with your thoughts on the responses and any other quick closing thoughts that you might have, Kim.
I wasn't surprised by the results. I think they reflect the fact that as we think about longer term careers in market research, analytics, insights, all of the related areas, we're going to tend to want to learn more about those things that we either have the least amount of knowledge about or that we're least comfortable with. And so we've got people coming from different places that really want to build their understanding and skill sets in those particular areas. I think the one watch out that I would say is that we probably don't have enough understanding of what AI can deliver. I personally don't see AI as just machine learning connected, although today it's primarily that. One of the reasons for that is that AI originally came up to be a way to gain efficiency. And I think most of us today still think about it as an efficiency tool. But if you really think about bigger picture, AI can be very adaptive. It can be transformative. And I think what we have to get our arms around is, where can that technology take us beyond machine learning? And that's why it's so critical for data analytics and insights. So I would just wrap up saying, I think there's a lot more exploration to be done, and we've really just touched the surface related to AI.
Totally agree. Ladies, thank you so much. We have some questions that we want to try to get to. And I know we're a little short on time, but I do want to turn it over to Sarah, who's been monitoring those questions. And so Sarah, you'll take it from here.
That's great. Thanks, Jessica. So I don't know if we'll be able to get through all of the questions in our session today, but I did want to pose a few specific ones that came through. Autumn, I'm going to ask you to think back the best that you can. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned you used the word de-skilling, that was kind of an issue that you saw. What are some of the skills you believe are missing or are being negatively impacted?
So one, I don't even know if de-skilling is a real word. It's just what I used. So, but yes, so let me think through some of the examples. I mean, I've seen everything from situations where market researchers don't know how to effectively think about sample construction, to situations where market researchers are creating unintentional bias in the construction of the research sample by how they're asking questions at screening. I've seen situations where market researchers have not necessarily effectively thought through the bias that is created by the person who's conducting the interview because there is not alignment in phenotype among the interviewer and the respondent. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I'm happy to create a comprehensive list of that, but it's both in design, execution, and analysis in which I'm seeing the de-skilling. And as someone who loves research, really, really loves research, it actually makes my heart sad. It makes my heart sad as someone who loves this discipline, and that's a very emotional response. As someone who is in business, I also have a rational response, and that is, this is not good for business decision making.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Autumn. I have a feeling you can give us a lot more on that, but I appreciate that very much. Let's see. Let's just do for time maybe one question each. So, Dawn, this one's for you. You mentioned that you really felt like you would love the Schwab culture before you took that role, if the question asker is understanding that correctly, and I believe that is what you said. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to believe that you would love the culture? Often it's very hard to get a sense of that before you actually started a company, and any tips that go with that for assessing the culture of a company before you join it.
Sure. So back to my point earlier about landscaping, I talk to headhunters regularly. And when the headhunter actually approached me about Schwab, I actually sent her somewhere else. And she came back and said, actually, just do me a favor, just talk to these people. And as I started talking to the strategy lead, the digital lead, who would be my direct manager at the time, that was where I started to see the value started to come out. And they talked again about this is the Schwab culture and such. So from the interview panels that I talked with, as well as what I had seen on Glassdoor. And then actually I reached out to a couple of people that had friends of friends that worked at Schwab to understand. So it was back to really just doing the good landscaping that I had mentioned. And then amazingly coming on, it did play out. So I was very lucky with that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. And then again, just for time, I know we're not going to get to every question, and I apologize for that. But Kim, and please don't take it personally that this is the question I picked for you. But one of the first questions that we got in the session, so I did want to make sure that we hit on it, is late in career transitions, and in particular, folks who might be dealing with ageism. Any tips for approaching that, positive framing, any tips that you have for folks kind of doing those late in career transitions?
Boy, that's a loaded question, and you don't want me to take it personally, so I won't. I think certainly there is ageism out there, but with our agility, with our ability to adapt as individuals, with all that we've learned in our careers, I think there's a world of opportunity out there for all of us, no matter what your late in career is. I mean, I've retired now 3 times, and I don't think I'm done yet. So each of us just needs to think about what we're passionate about, what's important to us, what we want to contribute and where we want to contribute. And I would say as you're exploring opportunities, starting to interview, not only do you need to think about your own passions and where you want to contribute, but you need to demonstrate to potential employers or even nonprofits where you may be looking to volunteer. What you need to demonstrate is the same things you would demonstrate earlier in your career. You want to be energetic, passionate. You want to be curious. You want to ask them lots of questions to make sure that you're getting the right fit. And I don't think there are any barriers to any of us doing exactly what we want to do once we figure out what it is. Another part of that Nobel Prize winning economics write-up, if you have a chance to go and read it, is that our aging population is one of the biggest transformation factors that's going to be relevant to our economy in the coming years. Like in 2040, there's going to be a huge shift point in terms of what our workforce looks like. And it's already, I mean, it's in plain sight now. So older workers are going to be valued in very different ways. They'll be bringing experience. They'll be bringing all kinds of things that where young people just aren't available to fill some of those jobs. So what does that mean for us, and how do you get out in front of that? So I'm happy to talk to anyone about any of this anytime, because I think you're only as old and only as biased against as you allow yourself to be. How's
That's
that?
fantastic. Thank you, Kim. And Laura in the chat just also shared a resource from AARP that folks who are interested in that may want to check out. So with that, I'll add my thanks to the panel and to Jessica, and turn it over for closing remarks to Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I could screen share, but I have 2 slides. I might as well just talk it. I mean, the first one is just a magnificent, as large as I could possibly say or show it. Thank you and gratitude to the insight, the wisdom, the experience of the panel, and Jessica's masterful stewarding of the process as well. This is fantastic. Our upcoming event, stay tuned. Kurti Singh is going to participate in a webinar, probably more like end of first quarter. So we'll see if we have something before that or if that's the next event. But definitely stay tuned. Definitely go to the alums website and sign up for the newsletter to the Insights and Analytics Forum. And I'm hitting enter now in the chat. So you can click the link, and what will happen is you'll leave this webinar platform and go straight to a regular Zoom meeting. And once I see that everybody gets there, I'll join you there and go from there. So thank you, everybody, and look forward to seeing you in a minute.
Thanks, Jeff.
You're most welcome.
Again, thanks to all of you. So awesome. Love spending time with you ladies today.
Awesome. And I don't see any asks for help in the chat, so I'm going to go to the Zoom as well and end this, and we'll see you in a second if you can join. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.